I believe the message we just had pop up is now suggesting the meeting is now live streaming on YouTube, and therefore we can begin the meeting of the Commercial Investments Committee. I do have a certain amount of this meeting which has been, a script has been provided for me so that I don't get any of the information wrong about how we are conducting this meeting and the methods and procedures in which we'll be undertaking. So I will be reading that script for parts of the meeting. And just for the benefit of both members of this meeting and members of the public that might be watching, I have two screens that I operate from. So I'm not watching television if I'm not looking at the camera. I'll be looking at my computer screen, and so I am paying full attention, I can assure you. So I'll move to the script, and to start by saying I'd like to welcome those members of the public and press who are watching the live stream of this meeting via the Council's website. Due to the government guidance on social distancing, this meeting is being held remotely in accordance with the provisions set out in the local authorities and police and crime panels, coronavirus, flexibility of local authority and police and crime panel meetings, England, Wales, Regulation 2020, and with Cambridgeshire County Council's own virtual meeting protocol. A decision summary and minutes of the meeting will be produced in the usual way, and a recording of this meeting will be available to view on the meetings page of the Council's website. To enable the meeting to run in an orderly manner, I would ask all members of the committee to keep their video cameras switched on for the duration of the meeting and to keep their microphones muted, except for when I invite them to speak. Officers will join us to introduce their reports in the usual way. Any members wishing to ask questions or make a comment should indicate this by clicking the raised hand function on the right-hand side of their screens. It should be on the right-hand side if you've clicked the Participants tab, which should be at the bottom of your screen. When I invite you to speak, please unmute your microphone and ask your question, and then mute it again immediately afterwards, allowing a response. There will be no points of order or personal explanation. As with all new arrangements, especially those involving new systems, there is always a risk that we may run into technical problems, and I would ask for your patience if we do. Should this occur, I will declare an adjournment while the fault is addressed, and the public broadcast will be paused. If it is not possible to address this fault, the meeting may be abandoned until such a time as it can be reconvened. Please also note that to facilitate discussions, I intend to waive the committee procedure rules limiting members to contributions of only once for 5 minutes. I will also propose to allow members to speak more than once on each item if appropriate. However, make sure that your contributions remain concise and to the point. And I would like to remind members and officers that all virtual meetings will be recorded. So I hope that was all clear for everybody, and that's our procedures for today. I'm sure it's familiar to most officers and members now, as this is not our first meeting of virtual meeting through the Zoom platform. So I hope this is familiar to a few of you. For the benefit of making sure that all can be heard and we can hear them, which is part of the legislation, I am going to read out the committee members' names, and once I have read your name out, if you can just respond to say that you are present and you can hear, and we can obviously then make sure that you are heard. So, starting with Councillor Ian Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can confirm that I'm present and I can hear and I can see.
Thank you very much. Councillor Lorna Dupre.
Present, thank you.
Councillor John Gowing.
All present and correct.
Councillor Anne Hay.
Present.
Councillor David Jenkins.
I'm here.
Councillor Linda Jones.
I'm here.
Councillor Terry Rogers.
Present.
Councillor Mike Shellens. If you can unmute your microphone, Councillor Shellens, and just try that one more time. Still not hearing you, Mike. You may be muted on your laptop or whatever device you're using.
I think he switched off the video in error.
Ah. We seem to have a connection issue with Councillor Shellens. I'll come back to Councillor Shellens. Councillor Wotherspoon.
Present.
Thank you, and myself, and I presume you can all hear. I haven't missed anybody off that list. Good, then Councillor Shellens, are you back in the room? No, hopefully Councillor Shellens should be, I can see you now, Councillor Shellens. Can you hear us and can we hear you? Not quite. Okay, so we'll wait for, hopefully Councillor Shellens will be able to join us and we'll be able to hear Councillor Shellens at some point throughout the meeting. So that being the case, and that we've checked that we have all of our connections for the members present, I now move to agenda item number 1, and that is the apologies and for absence and declaration of interest. Dawn, do we have any apologies for the meeting today?
No apologies, Chairman.
Good, thank you very much. And then we move to declarations of interest. Members, if any of you have any interest to declare on any of the items we're considering today, if you can use the raise hand function, and then I will come to you to declare your interest. Good, that indicates no interest being declared on the items today. And so we move on to our agenda item number 2, the minutes and then the action log for the committee meeting held on the 21st of February. Firstly, the minutes. Again, on a similar process, I will ask that any of the members that are present or that have read the minutes that have any comments, if you can raise your hand on the raise hand function now. I've received no raised hands, therefore there's no comments on the minutes. I will then therefore also take those minutes as unanimously approved, unless I get any raised hand to the contrary. So I will wait 1 second to see if anyone has any comments to the contrary on the minutes. If not, I'll take those as approved. Good. That moves on to agenda item 2, the action log. We move on to the action log in the committee report, and this is on, for the benefit of those following the papers, on pages, just bear with me 1 moment.
17.
Thank you, that's helpful. 17, I believe that was. So, action log on page 17. Any comments from members on that page 17 action log? I have Councillor Ian Bates.
Thank you, Josh. I'm looking at 183. Can we please approach the football club to see what their timeline might be in their proposed move, which is indicated there? I think it would be useful. This has been hanging around for some considerable time. Thank you.
I don't know if John Macmillan, you wish, or Alex G, wish to provide an update on that or a comment on, so that's action 183, and this is St Ives Football Club.
John Macmillan speaking. Yeah, we can approach the club, but I think their planning consent on the site that they were going to move to hasn't worked out. So until they resolve that, they have nowhere to go to. But I'll come back to the meeting with comments from the football club.
If I could ask that sort of comment about the planning consent issue and any other comments are circulated to all members electronically, that would be very helpful. Thank you, John. Next, I have a comment from Councillor Lorna Dupre.
Thank you, Chairman. I've got a number of questions. Firstly, on 2742, legal advice to be circulated once received. That doesn't seem in the final column to have been closed off or updated. And then there are 3 items with no notes and no update on the following page at 3231, 3232 and 324.
Thank you. So firstly, on the comment on the update on the legal advice, I can assure you that's not through a lack of trying to receive the legal advice around this land board. And I know that Chris Mallion has also contacted our legal team to receive the advice on it. It is an action which has now been long overdue, and so I give you assurance that we will be chasing this following this meeting and provide that legal advice and circulate to members. With the other actions, they are firstly related to the mobilising local energy team, and although we do have Sarah here who sits in that team, I'm not sure Sarah's best placed to answer the questions on those, so I may have to ask that Cheryl French comes back to members with an update that she can circulate to you.
If I may speak, Chairman, I can answer 3232. I happen to know that that is being addressed.
Thank you, that's really helpful. Okay, sorry, I was just looking at familiarising myself with the last one, which is the Cambridgeshire Outdoors Property Capital Investment. And that's marked as Amanda or Tom. Do either of you wish to come in on that item?
Yes, good morning, Chair and committee. We did do some work on that, and the new reporting structure went to Constitution and Ethics earlier in the week for approval. So we're now clear about where the different traded services report into.
Thank you. So that can be provided as an update again on that. I think some of it's to do with the timing of this meeting and the other meetings which have handled these issues. Any further comments on the action log? I have no other raised hands. That being the case, then we do move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item number 3, and that's petitions and public questions. Dawn, just to confirm, I've received no petitions or public questions.
Yes, that's correct, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Now we move on to agenda item number 4, and this is, yes, agenda item number 4, disposal of land at Lode and the former Dullingham depot. And this paper will be presented by Sarah Anderson, and we also have Alex G and John Billen here who will be able to answer questions. Can I invite Sarah Anderson, Strategic Asset Manager, to introduce the report? And once done, Sarah has done so, I have a comment from the local member, but I'll ask Sarah to introduce the report from who's our Strategic Asset Manager. Thank you, Sarah.
Good morning, everybody. As you know, East Cambridgeshire District Council's local plan was withdrawn in 2018. In this last couple of years or 18 months, there's been a housing shortfall in East Cambridgeshire, which has presented an opportunity for developers and landowners to bring forward sites to obtain planning permission for residential development. Strategic Assets has obtained planning permission on 2 sites, one at an area of land at Lode and one at the former Dullingham depot site for 4 residential units. Since we have obtained planning permission, we have offered those sites in line with the disposal policy of the County Council to this land, who declined the opportunity to buy the properties. We subsequently offered them to the parish and the district councils, and then to OPE members. We received no interest from any of those bodies. Following this, we have secured tenders from marketing agents to market the properties on the open market. These quotes produced a range of figures for what we expect to receive for the sites, which for both sites look to be coming in above the 500,000 threshold, so C&I approval is required. We are asking for approval to delegate to the chair of C&I and the deputy chief executive if we receive an asking price over 500,000 for them to agree the terms and conditions of the sale. Due to the COVID-19 outbreak and with the unknown impact of this on the market, if we receive offers under £450,000, we are recommending that we'll come back to C&I for formal approval.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Sarah, just to be clear, and I know this is only a very technical comment on because of the Constitution, the delegation is actually to the Deputy Chief Executive in consultation with the Chair. I know that I not be given executive powers to be delegated to, so it'll be delegated to Chris Mannion in consultation with myself. I have a couple of indications for speakers, so I will, unless there's anything from Alex or John who wish to add to Sarah's report. Great, thank you. Then I will move to the speakers, and our first question or comment comes from Councillor David Jenkins. Councillor Jenkins.
Thank you, Chair. I hope we can make this easy to process by removing some confusion in the recommendation, because it's rather ambiguous. So if you have a look at the recommendation, there's a strange semicolon at the end of the 4th line, which doesn't need to be there. And then I've got this enormous question, because of course it needs a gap between 500,000 and 450,000. So I would like to propose an amendment whereby we remove the semicolon and changes the last sentence to read, if the purchase price falls under 500,000 for each site, approval of the disposal will be required from C&I committee. And that removes the ambiguity in the recommendation.
I will ask perhaps Chris or Sarah to come in and respond to that, but I believe it's because of the constitution around the level of sale price that is then delegated, which means that that's why the 500,000 threshold has been put on there, because that's a requirement that anything over £500,000 must be done. I'll bring you in one moment, Councillor Shannons, must be done through the members' sign off. And what we're saying is that if it drops below 450, we wouldn't allow office to sell it, because we would prefer it to come back for our consideration, because then it would be too low for us to warrant that being sold at that price. I'll bring in Chris and Sarah if I haven't managed to explain that fully. Then I'll come to Councillor Shannons, who I believe may have a point of order or a problem with the system.
You have explained it perfectly, Chairman. As you say, the delegation in the Constitution is to me for any assets with a value up to £500,000. Therefore, if it's below £500,000, I have that full delegated authority already within the Constitution. What this report is saying is, as you rightly have pointed out, if it falls, we are recommending if it falls below 450,000, I wouldn't take that under delegated authority. So if it's between 450 and 500, I will do so. But if it's below 450, I'll come back to committee for their approval.
Thank you, that makes sense. Sorry, Councillor Shannons, were you indicating, because I know you have indicated by blue hand, but are you also indicating you're struggling to hear, or is there an issue? Your microphone's still on mic, Councillor Shannons. Sorry, your microphone's still on mute, Councillor Shannons. No, it's now muted on Zoom as well.
Probably muted on his laptop.
That's what I'm presuming. Is your microphone muted on your laptop? It's under, if you've got a council laptop, it should be on the F4 button or around there. Still not hearing you, unfortunately, Councillor Shannons.
Chairman, if I may,
muted on Zoom.
ring and
sorry, Dan, were you speaking there? I missed that.
sorry, yeah, I'll give Councillor Shannons a quick ring if you want to go to another question.
Thank you very much. That'd be really helpful. In the meantime, Councillor Jenkins, did you want to come back on that comment at all? Are you happy with the explanation?
I understand the explanation. It still means the recommendation is a bit ambiguous, but I'm still a little bit uncomfortable about, in these times, allowing that window of opportunity for us to sell land below a price that we'd be looking for. So I'd like to keep it above 500. It can be done by you and Chris, and below 500 comes back to the committee.
Are there any issues from your, I mean, I know that's certainly, it's then contrary to the Constitution, Chris, but is that a problem if it goes below 500 that it will come back to this committee for consideration?
It's not a problem, Chairman. It's just a variation to the Constitution, which is if under the circumstances you wish to enforce that, that's fine.
Thank you. What I may request is that then if we can do that electronically, because if it was 499, for instance, I would then be frustrated to have to bring the item back. So if it can be set at a threshold that it was within a parameter, I don't know if that's a possibility.
If we're doing it electronically, Chairman, I think that's easy to expedite. So I have no problems with whatever the value.
Okay, we'll look at some. Thank you. We'll look at some amended wording to the recommendation. If I can ask either Sarah or Chris to just come up with some amended words while we take a few more questions and points, so that we can just incorporate Councillor Jenkins' comments. And David, I've got you to indicate that you wish to speak again, or is that just from last time?
No.
Great, thank you. I won't bring in Councillor Shannons because I think he's still having problems with being heard. So I'll bring in Councillor Dupre next.
Thank you, Chairman. I think I'd like to endorse where I think Councillor Jenkins was going with this. As stated, the recommendations seem to give a window of opportunity for officers and yourself to accept a price that is up to 10% less than we believe the value to be worth in each case. And I think that's quite a large gap. So I would very much support coming back to members if it was under 500,000 in either case, and I'm happy for that to be done electronically with an explanation of the reasons for what's happened. My query really is kind of what's the rush on disposal of these? I know that the report says that there is a requirement to produce to submit an application for reserved matters on the part of whoever ends up buying the land within 2 years of the permission. But in each case, the permission has only been recently granted. If that's the only driver, I don't see any reason to, in the report, for us to be moving post haste at a time where we may not be, for time reasons, able to achieve the optimum return.
That spacebar stopped working. Sarah, did you want to respond about the timing issue and potentially also the market at the minute with regard to whether we are likely to realise the value we had hoped?
Yes, basically the time limit starts from the date of permission. So Dullingham Depot was actually granted in October of last year, and Load was granted, actually had the decision notice through, I think it was April this year. So for Dullingham,
I thought it said January. It's in the report anyway.
Pardon. Beg your pardon. I'm just trying to locate it.
(1.1).
Thank you. Sorry. Yes, you're quite right.
Sorry.
In October of last year for the land at Load, for Dullingham, and January for the land at Load. You're quite right. I beg your pardon. So the 2 years runs from that period. So for particularly Dullingham, we're eating into that two-year window. If we take this to market, it will then take time to actually go through the completion of the documentation for any developer to then submit the reserve matters application. So that's why we have one eye to the time frame. The other point I'd like to make is from the advice we've received from the marketing agents, whilst the impact of the COVID-19 pandemic is unknown on the market, at present, it is felt that smaller sites will still continue to do well. So we are still very hopeful to get a good price on these sites. But we won't actually know until as we test the market, but that is the advice we've received so far.
Thank you for that explanation, Sarah. And I think the point that was sort of being teased out with the minimum and maximum levels of was that we are trying to avoid any suggestion that it was going to be a quick sale, that we just want to go out to market and see where it is. And if we have found that COVID has such a significant impact to devalue the site, that we would certainly not sell it, but bring it back to committee for its consideration.
Correct.
Thank you, Chair. That's somewhat reassuring. It just had a smell of the fire sale about it a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate that. And it's certainly not the case. We're quite the opposite. We are saying we want to go to market because that's the logical next step. But if the market is not ready for us, then we will certainly come back and reconsider this. I'm mindful that Councillor Shellams appears to have two phones and still a connection issue.
Mike Shellams.
Okay. Councillor
Join
Shellams,
the meeting.
We've just heard your introduction via the mobile phone, so we can both see you and hear you on two different platforms, I believe now. Can you hear us?
Well, I can't see me, so I'm better off than you lot.
We're now getting an echo. Could you possibly try and mute your microphone, ironically, on your video screen, and hopefully we'll just hear your voice.
I'm not sure how to get back to the video screen from Outlook.
There may be a small icon in the corner, and you just have to say if you click on.
Can we just live with it?
Yeah, it's bearable. So I'll hand over to you for your question. Thank you, Mike.
Right. Well, the question is, where have we got to with David's proposal?
Thank you. I will ask.
Because I've missed the intervening.
Thank you. We were looking
Conversation.
to just rejig some of the wording on the recommendation, and I don't know if Sarah or Chris has a recommendation.
I do, Chairman, if
Thank
you can bear with me. I would suggest that, picking up Councillor Jenkins' point, that we have two recommendations. The first, which stops at the semicolon, as is currently within the report. And then there's a recommendation B, which reads something along the lines of, should the value fall below £500,000, the committee will be consulted before the disposal is progressed.
Right. Thank you very much. If that were to be accepted, I would have no further point to make. I would be very concerned, given some of the interactions I've had with a member of the public, if we were to leave with you something below the committee base figure. My second point would be, I think that timing of the sale should be deferred for the time being until we get a resumption of something approximating to relative normal.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Shannons. I don't know how much you missed of the discussion with your connection issues. Okay, I presume was probably the case. We are saying that now with that change to the recommendation A part and then the B part, hopefully that captures your concern. That if it does, yeah, it does drop below the level, then we'll be reconsulted, and then presumably if it drops below a certain point, members will agree to have it brought back to committee to decide whether we dispose of it or not. And actually the explanation from Sarah Anderson is that the market is suggesting that COVID is having a lesser impact on sites of this size and nature. So we may find that it hasn't got such a significant impact. So therefore the best course of action really to find that out is to test the market and to see now whether there'll be much interest at the values we hope.
Thank you.
So with that, thank you, Chris, for the wording. With that additional wording and slight change in the recommendation, I have no other speakers. Councillor Shannons, you still indicated to speak, but I presume that's previous indication. So with that being the case, I will look to move to the vote. Dawn, do you wish us to take a vote by roll call, or because I've heard no comments to the contrary with the change to the recommendation, are you happy to take the vote en masse, and that if I have no indication to the contrary, we'll take it as unanimous support?
I'm happy with that latter approach, Chairman.
Thank you. Then I will take the vote as unanimously supported, but the recommendation unanimously supported. That's the new recommendation as proposed by Chris Mallion, unless I have any indication in the sidebar for hands that are raised to the contrary. I'll wait just a moment. No, that being the case, it's unanimously supported. Recommendations A and B as amended. Thank you. We now move on to the next agenda item. And this is, we move on to agenda item number 5, and this is the water procurement update. And I'd like to invite Sarah Wilkinson, the Energy Manager, to introduce this report. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So this report is to update the committee on progress towards procuring a supplier for water and sewerage services for all the council's buildings and request approval to proceed. It is important to note that the procurement of a supplier does not make any difference to the physical supply or quality of mains water to our sites or the drainage of used water, which remain the responsibility of the regional water companies. The retail supplier provides all meter reading, customer service and billing functions. By appointing a supplier, we hope to make some cost savings on our water bills, although we should be aware that margins are tight in this industry, so these are likely to be small. However, it will also streamline the process by having one supplier and give us improved access to our water usage data, which could assist us to reduce consumption. As you'll know, our original plan for this was to procure a supplier directly, and I'm coming to you with this report today having changed that plan, partly because we ran a procurement and we received no bids when we went out to tender in January, and partly because a new opportunity has now arisen to join a Crown Commercial Services aggregated competition with other public sector bodies. I draw your attention to the table in paragraph 2.10 to compare this new opportunity against the alternative option of repeating a procurement exercise in-house. And I'm recommending that we join the CCS aggregated competition because this will be a cheaper and easier procurement process, utilising CCS's expertise with this framework, and also gives us greater potential for savings through economies of scale when compared to our purchasing power alone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah, for that introduction to the report. Members, any comments, questions to Sarah on the water procurement report? I've had one indication to speak, and that's Councillor Dupre.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not, I think, opposed to the recommendation, but what I am a little concerned about is indeed the table that Sarah drew our attention to at 2.10. It didn't seem to me to be one. I don't mean to suggest anything or to impute any motives to Sarah, but it didn't look as objective as I would expect such a table to look. What it looked like to me was not an attempt to draw up a set of strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats, and then derive a proposal from that. It looked almost the other way round. It looked to me as if there had already been a preferred way forward, and that the table was drawn up in kind of in a way to actually justify the proposal that had already been presumed to be the favoured proposal. Some of the items in some of the boxes could just as easily have applied to one proposal rather than the other, or to both equally. And I'm just a little concerned. I've seen this before, where tables don't look as kind of objective in their drawing up as they might have done, and seem to follow rather than lead the decision that's being recommended to us.
Sarah, did you wish to respond to that?
Yes, I can assure you that this is my view of the strengths and weaknesses of the two options. I'd be happy to address any questions on particular items on the table if that would help.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm happy to take that discussion offline with Sarah. And as I say, I'm not imputing any motives to Sarah in this, and I don't necessarily disagree with the outcome. It's just, I think there's an issue about how we get to the recommendations, and I'll take that up offline with Sarah.
Thank you very much, and I'm sure Sarah will happily take it on offline and explain where we've got to and how we've got to this point. Councillor Shellens, I have an indication. Just before I bring you in, Councillor Shellens, I'm slightly concerned that Councillor Jenkins appears to be disappearing bit by bit. Is that a connection issue, or is that just a? Oh no, that's fine. Great.
Perhaps he had a new slimming program. I speak as having had 20 odd years with the water industry. And I'd just like to ask, has anybody gone to Anglian Water and said, could you give us the benefits that you think you're going to get through this contract? Because that would remove all the sewerage issues and the majority of the water supply issues. And when I was there, we were already looking at providing this sort of information to all users. And that was in 1999. Shows how old I am.
Thank you.
End of question.
Okay, so I'm also a former employee of Anglian Water. As you'll know, the water market opened to competition in 2017. So whilst Anglian Water remain the wholesaler, as a non-household sites are obliged to go through one of the retail companies to procure their water and sewage services. So whilst we could go, I think in order to to not be awarding directly, it's prudent to go through a proper procurement process.
I think we should talk offline.
Okay.
Thank you. I haven't heard, either of those discussions that are going to be had outside of this that would potentially interfere with the recommendations as laid out. So more than happy for those conversations to happen offline, but the recommendation is clear today that we have found ourselves in a position of going out to tender, having little market interest. And so this is offering another opportunity, which is what the recommendation is suggesting. So I've had, Councillor Jones, I don't know if you've had a problem with the raise hand function. I've had a couple of yellow wavy hands and faces. I guess that's you're wishing to speak and contribute, and apologies if I missed you in the last item.
Thank you. I have no problem with going forward with the CCS framework. I think it's a very sensible idea. The concern that I had was that I can understand there's a sort of lot 1 and lot 2 issue here, and the option, the notion of aggregated competition is fine, but the ancillary services issue is one that really concerns me, because this is where we can do some automation, we can save water, we can bill people differently, and in terms of the climate change strategy, this is actually quite important. And so what my concern would be that we don't lose sight of that, and I would be interested to get an update on what progress you're making and what thoughts you have now, if you can speak them publicly, about how we might go forward with that part of it.
Yes, thank you. As you know, our initial plan was to include both the core retail services and ancillary services in one procurement. And what we found when we went out to market with that combination, that suppliers, there wasn't sufficient interest in that combination of services, which is one of the reasons to now take that different approach. I don't think, with the benefit of hindsight, I don't think that it will make a difference in the long run whether we procure them together or separately. And given that we've not been able to procure them together, the logical next step is to do so separately. The ancillary services, I believe, are less urgent. We're not buying any of those services now, and we're managing okay without them. Having said that, I think there are some of these services that will be beneficial to us, so it's still a good idea to look for those types of services. There are also more companies out there that are able to supply ancillary services than there are that can do everything, if that makes sense. So there's greater potential for competition by separating them, because there's a bigger range of suppliers that only do ancillary services. So I hope that answers your question. Yes, we won't forget about that, but I think we need to get a retailer in place first and then revisit that once we've got established and seen what service we get from our retailer.
Thank you. Apologies before I bring in anybody else for comments and questions. Councillor Shellens, I don't know whether it's possible to mute or to turn the sound off on your laptop, or you're now not using the phone. We still appear to have an echo. I'm sure everybody's suffering that. Now, I can hear everybody okay, but apparently YouTube is really making it difficult for members of the public to hear. So I'm not sure whether there is a way, I presume, Councillor Shellens, it's because of you're dialing in. If you are hearing it through the phone, whether you could turn the sound off on Zoom or on your device.
You might have to mute the phone.
One or other, so either turning the sound off on your device or muting on your phone.
I don't think I can unmute the phone. I've got a button on the bottom of my screen with a microphone emblem, and if I go mute or unmute, it seems to make no difference.
No, and are you hearing the meeting through the phone that you're using to speak through?
Yes.
Is there a option, if you look at the bottom right-hand corner of your device, whatever you're using, to mute the speakers or to turn off sound on the device so that you're only hearing it once?
No.
Okay, I think we're going to have to suffer as best we can. I've just asked that both myself and members and officers to try and speak as slowly and clearly as possible, because it will hopefully lessen the impact of the echo for those joining us on YouTube.
And I apologise for my incompetence.
Not at all. Please don't worry, Councillor Shones, it's not your incompetence. I know this technology is new to all of us. So I will see if, I believe Dan is going to see if he can work with you while the meeting continues to see if we can reduce the echo. So we move to our next speaker, which is Councillor Bates. Sorry, Councillor Jones, you're still indicating to speak as that previously. I presume it is. If so, I'll move to Councillor Bates.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.
It's some clarification. I assume a report will come back at some point in the future, assuming we accept the recommendations as laid out on the paper. So it's seek some clarification about what might come back.
Yes, we can certainly update the committee afterwards as to what has happened, either in my team's quarterly report or as a separate item if required.
I'm not sure it needs to be a quarterly report. I think something in future, once we've gone through the new procurement and have the new services in place, would be helpful by way of update, even if not as part of an item on the agenda, but just circulated to committee members so that we're aware of the progress. Thank you. I see a nod to that. And actually, I believe the sound quality has improved. Can I have a thumbs up for everybody? Is that the case? Great, fantastic. Thank you very much for Dan or whoever has managed to help sort that issue out. Next, so I still have Linda indicated, but I presume, Linda, that again is just to check that's not you wish to speak again, that was previously indicated. Did you wish to speak, Councillor Jones, Linda? You're still on mute.
Sorry, are you talking to me?
I am, yes.
No, I'd said what I wanted to, and that's fine.
That's
I mean,
fine.
I didn't get an awfully full answer from Sarah, because what my interest was in the relationship between the ancillary services and the possible impact on climate change if we went for the ancillary services quickly. But I can take it with her offline. It's not an issue.
Thank you very much. Members, I have no other indication to speak, and I've had no comments to the contrary to the, against the recommendations as proposed. Therefore, again, I'm proposing that we take that as unanimously supporting the recommendations. So unless I have any blue hands of indication to the contrary, I would take that as unanimously supporting. Good. So that's unanimously supported the recommendations. Thank you, Sarah. Before I move on to the next agenda item, it was a mistake of mine, members, on the previous item. I didn't read out that we have had comments from the local member. This is the load and disposals item. And that was just to state that Councillor Shooter had indicated he was more than happy to support the recommendations. So I just wish to place it on record, Councillor Shooter, as local member, supported those recommendations. We move on to our next agenda item, and this is the COVID update report. And I believe Amanda will be introducing this item, and Chris will then go on to talk about any financial implications from the report. So I'll hand over to Amanda Askham, Director of Business and Intelligence. Have I got your right title there?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Members will be aware that directors are providing weekly COVID-19 highlight reports, and they go to all members, and they're also published on our website so the public can access them. This report is a monthly summary of those highlight reports, particularly drawing out the things that are relevant to this committee. I know members are seeing these at every committee this month, so some of the sections here will be familiar if you've been to other meetings this week. The report takes us through the government response to coronavirus, the introduction of new legislation, and the Council's role in the Local Resilience Forum. It then goes on in section 4.7 to list some of the immediate work that we've undertaken to respond to the pandemic over the last few weeks. This list is by no means exhaustive. There's been a huge amount of activity across all areas of the Council, but it does seek to draw your attention to the major areas of our response. In section 5, the report then summarises activity and impact particularly relevant to this committee. And you'll see from this section that the pandemic is having an impact across all areas of our commercial portfolio, our property investments, our commercially focused services, our work to reduce costs in our supply chain around contracts and procurement. So what you see in this report and in the weekly high reports are summaries of our immediate response. This work obviously needs a great deal more analysis. We're doing a lot of modelling and scenario testing as we go forward. And to fully analyse the risk to the commercial return, you'll get a more detailed report at the next committee in May. So I'm going to stop there, happy to take any questions, and I'll hand over to Chris Mallion, Deputy Chief Executive and Section 151 Officer, to talk about the financial impact relevant to this committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Amanda, and Chair, through you. Members will be aware that we took as Amanda has highlighted, we've taken a service update to each service committee this cycle. We've also taken an overarching report to General Purpose Committee, which sat yesterday, which highlighted the current financial impacts of COVID-19, the funding that we were getting through government and support from the CCG in relation to some of the sort of key financial implications. That report showed a deficit of projected impact against additional funds of just under £10 million, but it was cognizant of the fact that didn't take account of the grant funding announced by the Secretary of State last Saturday. As we sit here today, we still haven't received notification of how much of that additional £1.6 billion will be coming to Cambridgeshire. So we're still working on the basis that we've got a nearly £10 million deficit, which will have to be funded by the council. Within that overarching financial position, there are a whole range of projections and assumptions, some of which will be understated, some of which will be overstated. But in relation to this service committee, obviously the focus is largely going to be around opportunities foregone or income not materialised, as opposed to adults, which will be around additional capacity and therefore costs incurred. In many ways, therefore, projecting for this committee the financial implications of COVID-19 is a little more challenging in many ways. As Amanda highlighted, we are going to go through in the next cycle a more detailed assessment for individual service committees. So this was our sort of first tranche, just to try set the scene and get the process operating. So next monthly cycle will have a more detailed projection appertaining to the implications for this service committee. Some are already highlighted in the report, as Amanda alluded to in section 5, around some of our commercial acquisitions and the potential impact. We haven't yet, apart from Brunswick House, we haven't yet agreed any abatement of rents or deferment of rents, but we are negotiating with those that have approached us, and we are obviously there have been requests for some rent deferral or rent abatements. So we will bring that back to this committee in terms of the position next month. In relation to Brunswick, which is the one where we have taken a decision around ensuring that students didn't return from the Easter break, and therefore making sure we don't exacerbate the potential of the outbreak purely because students wanted to make use of the fact that they've paid their tenancy up to a period. So we have suspended a lot of the for those who weren't present, but as the report highlights, there are still over 90 students who physically couldn't get home for various reasons, and they continue to pay their rent as they would have otherwise done. And as Amanda has highlighted, quite a lot of the work that's been done around the commercial area is actually supporting other service areas in terms of their supply chains and working with those supply chains to try and ensure that once the restrictions are started to be lifted, we do have services in place to maintain operational delivery across the council. So that's probably all I wanted to say by way of overview, Chairman. I said the more detailed financial implications, we have highlighted a number in the financial report of around £1 million, but at the moment we're still working through what the detailed implications of that will be on our commercial portfolio, and we'll bring that, at least some further information about actual numbers to the next committee in May. We're happy to take any questions, Chairman.
Thank you, Chris and Amanda. Just a few quick comments from me. Firstly, for members of the investment working group, you will have been circulated some more detailed explanation of what's happening with our commercial partners. But can I stress that those comments and or the information contained in that report are strictly confidential, so we cannot go into the detail of any of the businesses that have been highlighted or mentioned in a public session. I just wish to also place on record my apologies to Amanda for your title. I know your title is Director of Business Improvement and Development. Apologies, I got that slightly wrong. And lastly, to say that apologies, members, I'm just going to shut my window because we appear to have someone gardening outside. There we go, hopefully that's slightly better. To say that the reason for the late report is that to allow the report to contain the most up-to-date information. And the reason for the urgency is, obviously, I'm sure members and members of the public are aware, it's fairly obvious, but this is to enable the committee to be briefed on the situation in relation to the Council's current response to COVID-19 and the services it's responsible for. So I hope that just explains the reason for the lateness and the urgent nature of the report. Members, if you can indicate by the side panel again if you have any comments you wish to make or questions for the officers on the report. I will start with Councillor Lorna Dupre.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Two things I wanted to raise. Firstly, the report talks about investment at risk, and I'm trying to remember what the total is because I can't hold the space bar and navigate to the other pane which shows the report. But it was in the section particularly about Brunswick House, but was talking about investment at risk. I think it was 1.1 million, and I wasn't clear how that was split out between the different investments, and I wondered whether there was an answer to that could be given in public session. I'm happy to receive it by email if not. The other question was about the comment about South Cambridgeshire looking at a business angels network to try to get investment going in local business again. And normally, well, maybe it's just me, but I think of business angels as being individual, fairly wealthy people. And I wondered whether there was thought being given or an opportunity maybe for a more kind of local, communal, cooperative, peer-to-peer lending system that could involve more people in the community in investing smaller sums collectively that could then assist local businesses.
Thank you. I'm not sure who wished to take that first, but I'll hand over to Amanda, who I know will probably take part of at least one of those questions, if not both.
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. Chris may want to come in on the investments at risk, but I think at the moment we don't have the detail on that yet, Councillor Dupre. We are taking a view on how much of our total investment portfolio might be at risk, and we need to work through it. But I will allow Chris might want to come in with more detail on that. In terms of the business angels work, so South Cambs District Council were approached by some individuals who were saying, what can we do? How can we set up a network? So I think there was something we are considering there, whether that should be a county-wide, whether we could expand that to county-wide. But I think your suggestion that we should also look at something which is more akin to crowdfunding and investment is a really good one, and I'm very happy to take that away and have a look at it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Joan, if I just add, as Amanda's given me the opportunity to, so yes, at the moment that the 1.1 million is a projection based on our knowledge of the sectors of in terms of the portfolio, investment portfolio. Picking up your point, Chairman, there are, whilst I can give the breakdown of that assumption, I probably wouldn't want to do that in public, and therefore will circulate to the committee outside of the agenda.
Thank you very much for that. It's really helpful. Can I just say before, I haven't got any other indications yet to speak. There may be a few that come in. Just I make a comment to thank sincerely Amanda and Chris and the commercial team for providing the report and the detail that's included, and the obviously very positive response that we've had to a very challenging situation. So thank you very much for that, and I wish to place that on record. I'm sure members will endorse those comments. That being the case, and as I'm making those comments, I haven't had any other indication to speak on this item, unless I'll just wait a few more seconds. No, I'm having no other indications to speak. So we are asked to obviously just note this item and the report, and I'm sure we'll be having another, sorry, was that a wave? Did I have a, oh no, it's just a Councillor Cameron. I'm sure we'll have a updated report provided at our next meeting with further details, but thank you very much to all those involved with producing that report. We move on to, apologies, let me just check my script because I seem to go off script and then manage to miss things. So no, I think that's everything. So I can move on to agenda item number 7. And this is the committee agenda plan, training plan, appointments to outside bodies. And I will hand over to Dawn, who will take us through this item. Thank you, Dawn.
Chairman, I've got no additions to the agenda plan. On the training plan, we did originally have a training session on investment scheduled for immediately after this meeting. This will be rescheduled because it's turned out to be quite a busy morning, and I'm aware some members have other meeting commitments early this afternoon.
Thank you very much. And I am also aware that Amanda's report, the very report on COVID, touched on the fact that we'll be reviewing our multi-class credit investments. So we can perhaps tie in those two elements of the training and the multi-class credit update at some point. Members, I'm sure, will also be aware that we are trying to reduce the number of agenda items we have, which are not key decisions at the minute because of the challenges we face with meeting virtually, etc. We are trying to keep key decisions on our agenda. So some of our more standard reports that maybe we're used to receiving may be just circulated to note as opposed to being agenda items for these virtual meetings. Are there any other comments from members on our agenda, training and forward agenda? I have no other indications, so we just note the agenda plan and we're happy to note its contents. We move to our next, excuse me, we move to our next agenda item, which is the exclusion of press and public, which will enable us to move to our meeting on our Teams network, where we'll be discussing, and it's just being provided the title, which is the business plan for this land. But as is the process in the live meetings or the face-to-face meetings, we will also be taking a vote to exclude press and public, which we have to do, which is set out in the agenda, the explanation under which part of the Constitution and Local Government Act. So I will ask that we take a formal vote on this because I think it's important that we have that recorded. And I will hand over to Dawn, who will read your name in turn. And we'll ask whether you're in favour excluding the press and public, which we will then obviously terminate this meeting and reconvene a private meeting. So if you are in favour, just unmute your microphone and reply to Dawn with for or against. So I'll hand over to Dawn to go through that vote. Thank you, Dawn.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor Ian Bates.
For.
Councillor Lorna Dupre.
For.
Councillor John Gowing.
For.
Councillor Anne Hay.
4.
Councillor David Jenkins. Councillor Jenkins. We'll come back to Councillor Jenkins. Councillor Linda Jones.
4.
Sorry, was that Councillor Jenkins I heard as well?
Yep, 4.
Super. Councillor Terry Rogers.
4.
Councillor Mike Shellams.
4.
Councillor Tim Wotherspoon.
4.
And the chairman, Councillor Josh Schumann.
4. Thank you. That's unanimously supported that we exclude the press and public. However, members, at 11:20, I'm mindful that we've had a number of back-to-back meetings, and so I think a comfort break is probably in order. Can I ask that we take a 12-minute comfort break and meet at, so it's 11:18, and meet at exactly 11:30. So we're using the Microsoft Teams platform for the confidential meeting at 11:30. Dan, is that okay with you, and with the meeting request? Will that all work?
Yes, Chair.
So that concludes our business, as opposed to, apart from the confidential items we have left to discuss. So thank you to all those that have joined the meeting, and for those coming back for the confidential item, which I know it doesn't include Chris Mallion, who's also already declared an interest. I will see you back at 11:30 on the Teams meeting platform. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.